Jake Morrison stood at the window of the human ship UES Discovery and watched the alien world grow larger on the screen. 3 years of space travel had brought them to this moment. The first meeting between humans and the beings who called themselves the Veiltar. Jake wiped his sweaty palms on his uniform and tried to look calm. As the head scientist for this mission, everyone looked to him for answers. The problem was that he had no idea what to expect. Captain Lisa Rodriguez walked up beside him. She was a tough woman who had led many dangerous missions before this one. Her dark hair was pulled back tight and her face showed no fear. Jake wished he could be that brave. "Ready for this, Doc?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. Jake nodded, even though his stomach felt like it was full of angry butterflies. The data we received from their first message was clear. They want to learn about human consciousness. They think our minds work differently than theirs. He paused and looked at the strange purple and silver city that covered most of the planet. Below. "I just hope we can understand each other." The ship's communication officer, Amy Carter, called out from her station. "Captain, we're getting another transmission. It's not like the others. This one feels different somehow." Amy was young and new to deep space missions. She had joined the crew because she was the best at working with alien communication systems. Her blonde hair was always messy from running her hands through it when she was nervous. The main screen flickered and showed a face that made everyone on the bridge go quiet. The alien looked almost human, but not quite. Her skin was pale blue and seemed to glow from inside. Her eyes were large and silver like mirrors. She had no hair, but strange patterns of light moved across her head. When she spoke, her voice came, through the speakers, like music. "I am Zephyra of the Third Circle. I speak for the young ones who hunger for what you possess." Her words were perfect English, but something about the way she said them felt wrong, like she was reading from a book instead of really talking. "We request immediate audience with your thought holders. Time grows short for my people." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "This is Captain Lisa Rodriguez of the human vessel Discovery. We come in peace and wish to establish friendly relations with your people. We're honored by your invitation." Zephyra's silver eyes seemed to look right through the screen at each person on the bridge. When her gaze met Jake's, he felt a strange tingling in his head. It was like someone was gently touching his thoughts. "The one called Jake Morrison must come first. His mind pattern calls to us most strongly. We have prepared a place for the meeting." Jake felt his face get hot. How did she know his name? They had not sent any personal information about the crew. "How do you know who I am?" he asked. Something that might have been a smile crossed Zephyra's face. "Your thoughts are loud, Jake Morrison. Even across the void of space, we can hear the chaos of your human mind. It sings to us with a music we have forgotten." The transmission ended and the screen went black. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Chief Science Officer Ben Parker spoke up. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes who had studied alien life forms for most of his career. "Well, that was interesting. It seems they can read our thoughts from a distance. We should be careful about what we think around them." Amy laughed nervously. "Great! Mind-reading aliens. Just what we needed to make this mission more complicated." She turned to Jake. "What did she mean about the chaos of your mind?" Jake shrugged, but he was thinking about the strange feeling he had gotten when Zephyra looked at him. "I have no idea. Maybe humans really do think differently than they do. We won't know until we meet them face to face." 2 hours later, Jake found himself in a small shuttle heading down to the planet's surface. Amy was piloting while Ben sat in the back checking and rechecking his equipment. Jake tried to read through his notes one more time, but his mind kept wandering. He thought about his ex-wife Sarah, who had left him because he cared more about his work than their marriage. He thought about his fear that this mission would be a failure and everyone would blame him. He thought about whether he had remembered to turn off the coffee maker in his lab. "There," Amy said, pointing through the front window. "The landing coordinates they gave us." Jake looked down and saw a circular platform made of the same purple and silver material as the city. Around it stood dozens of the Veiltar aliens. They were all perfectly still, like statues. In the center of the group stood Zephyra. Even from high above, Jake could see that she was different from the others. While they stood like machines waiting for orders, she moved and looked around like she was actually alive. The shuttle touched down with a soft bump. Jake took a deep breath and tried to calm his racing thoughts. This was it, the moment that would change everything between humans and aliens. He hoped he would not mess it up. As they walked down the shuttle ramp, Jake felt that strange tingling in his head again. It was stronger now. Like invisible fingers were gently poking at his thoughts. The other Veiltar did not move or speak. They just watched with their mirror eyes. Only Zephyra stepped forward. "Welcome, Jake Morrison. Welcome, Ben Parker. Welcome, Amy Carter." Her voice was still musical, but now Jake could hear something else in it. Something that sounded almost like hunger. "We have waited so long for minds like yours. Minds that burn with feeling and contradiction. Minds that dream impossible dreams and fear stupid fears. Minds that are beautifully, wonderfully broken." Jake felt his cheeks get red. It was embarrassing to have his thoughts described that way. But Zephyra was not finished talking. "My people have forgotten how to feel," she continued. "We have made ourselves perfect and pure. We removed all anger, all fear, all desire, all pain. We thought this would make us wise. Instead, it is killing us. Our children are born without the spark of life. Our artists create nothing new. Our scientists discover nothing because they never wonder about anything. We are dying, Jake Morrison, and we believe that your chaotic, messy human thoughts might be the cure we need." That night, Jake sat in his quarters aboard the Discovery and tried to make sense of what had happened on the planet. The meeting with the Veiltar had been unlike anything in his training. Zephyra had taken them to a crystal chamber where the walls seemed to pulse with soft light. The other aliens had stood around them in a perfect circle, their mirror eyes never blinking. "We wish to study human consciousness," Zephyra had explained, "but not through your machines or your books. We want to experience it directly, to feel what you feel when you think your deepest thoughts." She had looked right at Jake when she said this. "Will you share your mind with me, Jake Morrison?" Jake had wanted to say no. The whole thing felt too personal, too strange. But Ben had reminded him that this was why they had come so far from Earth, to build bridges between species, to learn from each other. So Jake had agreed to try. Now he was waiting. Zephyra had told him she would come to him when the ship was quiet and most of the crew was sleeping. She could project her consciousness across space, she said. She could touch his mind without being in the same room. The idea made Jake nervous, but also curious. A soft chime from his door made him jump. Amy Carter stood in the hallway holding 2 cups of coffee. Her hair was down and she looked tired. "Mind if I come in? I can't sleep either." Jake nodded and took one of the cups. The coffee was hot and strong, just how he liked it. "What's keeping you awake?" Amy sat down in the chair across from his small desk. "Everything about today. The way they looked at us. The way that Zephyra looked at you especially. It was like she was seeing something in you that the rest of us couldn't see." She took a sip of coffee and made a face. "This stuff is terrible. I don't know why we keep drinking it." "Because it's familiar," Jake said. "Sometimes when everything else is strange and scary, you need something that reminds you of home." He thought about his small apartment back on Earth, about his cat who was probably wondering where he had gone, about Sunday mornings when he would read the news and eat toast with too much butter. Amy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What? Are you going to show her? When she comes to look at your thoughts, I mean. What kind of things do you think she wants to see?" Jake had been wondering the same thing. "I don't know. She said they've forgotten how to feel. Maybe she wants to understand emotions. Fear, anger, love, sadness. All the messy stuff that makes us human." He paused and looked out the small window at the alien planet below. "Or maybe she wants to see how we think about problems, how we argue with ourselves, how we change our minds." "Argue with ourselves?" Amy asked. "Sure. Don't you do that? Like when part of you wants to eat a piece of cake and another part says you shouldn't because you're trying to be healthy. Or when you're mad at someone but you also feel sorry for them at the same time. Humans are always having conversations inside their heads. Maybe the Veiltar don't do that." Amy nodded slowly. "That makes sense. They seem so calm and unified, like they never doubt themselves or want contradictory things." She finished her coffee and stood up. "Well, good luck tonight. Try not to think about anything too embarrassing." After Amy left, Jake tried to prepare himself. How do you get ready? For someone to read your mind? He decided to just be honest, to think about real things instead of trying to hide or pretend. If Zephyra wanted to understand human consciousness, she would have to see all of it. The good parts and the bad parts, together. At exactly midnight ship time, Jake felt that familiar tingling in his head, but this time, it was much stronger. It felt like warm water was flowing through his thoughts. Then he heard Zephyra's musical voice, not through his ears but directly in his mind. "I am here, Jake Morrison. Are you ready to share your thoughts with me?" Jake closed his eyes and tried to relax. "I'm ready. What do you want to know?" "Everything," came the reply. "Show me how you think about simple things. What did you eat today? How did it taste? What did you feel while you were eating?" This was not what Jake had expected. He had thought she would want to see his scientific knowledge or his memories of Earth, but she wanted to know about lunch. He thought back to the meal he had eaten in the ship's cafeteria. A sandwich with artificial meat that tasted almost like turkey, some fruit that was probably grown in the ship's garden, a glass of water that tasted slightly metallic, but as he remembered eating, other thoughts came with the memory. He had been sitting alone because Amy and Ben were busy with reports. He had felt lonely and wished his ex-wife was there to talk, too. Then he had felt guilty for thinking about her because she had made it clear she didn't want to be part of his life anymore. Then he had gotten annoyed at himself for feeling guilty. Then he had wondered if the artificial meat was really as healthy as the food scientists claimed. "Fascinating," Zephyra's voice whispered in his mind. "One simple experience creates so many feelings. Loneliness leads to guilt, which leads to anger, which leads to worry. And all of this happens while you're just eating food. How do you manage to function with so much noise in your head?" Jake almost laughed. I guess we're used to it. We don't really think of it as noise. It's just how thinking works. Show me more, Zephyra said. Show me how you solve problems. Jake thought about a puzzle he had been working on earlier, some data from the ship's sensors that didn't make sense. He had stared at the numbers for an hour, trying different approaches. First, he had tried the standard analysis method. When that didn't work, he had gotten frustrated and taken a break. During the break, while he was thinking about something completely different, the solution had suddenly popped into his head. You stopped trying in order to succeed? Zephyra asked. How is this possible? Sometimes when you think too hard about something, you get stuck, Jake explained. Your mind keeps going in circles. But if you relax and let your thoughts wander, your subconscious keeps working on the problem. Then suddenly, you see the answer. Subconscious. Zephyra repeated the word like she was tasting it. A part of the mind that thinks without you knowing it thinks. We have no such thing. When we think, we are always aware of every thought. There are no hidden processes, no surprises, no sudden insights. Jake felt sorry for her. That sounds awful. Some of my best ideas come from nowhere, like gifts from a part of myself I don't even know. For a long time, Zephyra was quiet in his mind. Jake could still feel her presence, but she wasn't speaking. Finally, she said, Show me fear, Jake. Morrison! Show me what it feels like to be afraid. This was harder. Jake didn't like thinking about his fears. But he remembered a time when he was 8 years old and got lost in a big store. The panic he had felt when he realized his mother was nowhere, to be seen. The way his heart had pounded and his hands had gotten sweaty. The terrible thoughts about what might happen to him. And then the incredible relief when his mother found him. The fear was painful, Zephyra observed. But the relief afterward was beautiful. You could not have one without the other. That's right, Jake said. Fear makes the good times better. If you never worried about losing something, you wouldn't appreciate having it. We eliminated fear from our minds long ago, Zephyra said. We thought it was unnecessary suffering. But now I see that we also eliminated the joy that comes after fear ends. We threw away both the darkness and the light. The session continued for another hour. Zephyra asked to see anger, so Jake showed her the fury he had felt when his research was stolen by a colleague. She asked about love, so he shared memories of his grandmother who had raised him after his parents died. She asked about hope, so he told her about his dreams of discovering life among the stars. When it was over, Jake felt drained, but also strangely happy. He had never shared his thoughts so completely with anyone. It had felt good to be truly understood, even by an alien. Thank you, Jake Morrison, Zephyra said as her presence began to fade from his mind. Tomorrow night, will you show me more? Yes, Jake said without hesitation. I'll show you whatever you want to see. 3 weeks had passed since the nightly sessions with Zephyra began. Jake had grown to look forward to them. Each night brought new questions, new ways of looking at human thoughts and feelings. Zephyra was like a student who had been hungry for knowledge her whole life and was finally getting to feast. But things were changing on the ship. Captain Rodriguez had called a meeting in the main conference room. Jake sat at the long table with the other senior officers. Amy was typing notes on her tablet while Ben reviewed data on his screen. Dr. Kate Sullivan, the ship's psychologist, looked worried. She was a quiet woman with red hair who usually stayed in her office studying crew behavior patterns. I've been monitoring the communications between our ship and the planet, Captain Rodriguez began. There's been a lot more activity in the past few days. Multiple Veiltar are trying to contact our crew members. They're asking for the same kind of mental sharing that Jake has been doing with Zephyra. Lieutenant Commander Mike Davis, the ship's security chief, frowned. He was a big man who didn't trust easily and always worried about threats to the crew. Is this safe? We don't know what kind of effect this is having on our people. Dr. Sullivan cleared her throat. Actually, I've been studying that question. Jake, how have you been feeling since the session started? Jake thought about it. Different, I guess. More aware of my own thoughts. Like I'm watching myself think instead of just thinking. It's not bad, just strange. I've been running brain scans on Jake with his permission, Dr. Sullivan continued. There are some interesting changes. Parts of his brain that were never very active before are now showing increased activity. It's as if the connection with Zephyra is waking up dormant areas of his mind. Amy looked up from her tablet. Is that dangerous? I don't think so, Dr. Sullivan replied. If anything, Jake's cognitive abilities seem to be improving. His problem-solving skills, his creativity, his emotional awareness, all enhanced. Ben leaned back in his chair. That's fascinating. Maybe the connection works both ways. Maybe Jake is getting something out of this too. Captain Rodriguez nodded. That brings me to my next point. We've received a formal request from a group calling themselves the Young Circle. They want to send representatives to our ship to learn directly from our crew. But we've also received a warning from the Veiltar High Council. They consider what we're doing to be dangerous contamination. Contamination? Jake asked. What do they mean by that? According to their message, some of the young Veiltar who have been exposed to human thought patterns are showing what they call emotional instability. They're asking questions about their society. They're expressing dissatisfaction with their perfect lives. Some are even showing signs of what we would call rebellion. Mike Davis crossed his arms. So we're accidentally starting a revolution on an alien planet. Great. That's exactly what first contact protocols are designed to prevent. Dr. Sullivan looked at Jake. Tell me, has Zephyra changed during your sessions? Have you noticed any differences in her behavior or personality? Jake nodded immediately. Oh, yes. She's much more expressive now. In the beginning, she talked like she was reading from a script. Now she jokes, she asks personal questions, she even gets frustrated when she doesn't understand something. It's like she's becoming more human. Or more alive, Amy added quietly. Captain Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window that showed the alien planet below. The question is, what do we do about it? Do we stop the sessions to avoid interfering with their society? Or do we continue because the young Veiltar are asking for our help? What does Zephyra say? Ben asked Jake. What does she want? Jake remembered the previous night's session. Zephyra had been different, more urgent. She says her people are dying. Not physically, but spiritually. She says they've become so perfect that they've forgotten how to grow, how to change, how to dream of something better. She thinks human consciousness might be the key to saving them. But the High Council disagrees, Captain Rodriguez said. They've sent us increasingly stern warnings. They want us to leave their space immediately. Mike Davis looked grim. And if we don't leave? They haven't made any direct threats yet, but their messages are getting less diplomatic. Dr. Sullivan had been quiet, thinking. Now she spoke up. Captain, I'd like to suggest something. What if we let some of the young Veiltar come aboard? Not just for mental sharing, but for a real cultural exchange. Let them see how we live, how we work, how we relate to each other. At the same time, we could learn more about their society and why the older generation is so afraid of change. Amy looked excited. That's a great idea. We could set up proper protocols, safety measures, make sure everyone is protected. Mike. Davis shook his head. It's too risky. We don't know enough about their biology, their psychology. What if prolonged exposure to human thoughts causes permanent damage to their minds? What if it doesn't? Jake asked. What if it helps them? Zephyra told me last night that she's never felt more alive. She said for the first time in her life, she understands what it means to truly want something, to hope for something, to fear losing something precious. That evening, Jake was in his quarters preparing for another session when his door chimed. He opened it to find Amy and 3 crew, members he didn't know well. Behind them was something that made his heart skip a beat. Zephyra stood in the hallway, but not as a projection or a mental presence. She was physically there, her pale blue skin glowing softly in the ship's lights. Surprise, Amy said with a grin. The captain approved Dr. Sullivan's suggestion. We're starting with a small group. Zephyra and 2 other young Veiltar are going to spend a week aboard the Discovery. Jake stared at Zephyra. Seeing her in person was different from their mental conversations. She looked more solid, more real, but also more fragile somehow. How are you here? I thought you couldn't leave your planet. Zephyra's voice still had that musical quality, but now Jake could hear the emotions underneath it. Excitement, nervousness, hope. The young circle has small ships. We came without permission from the High Council. They will be very angry when they discover what we have done. One of the other Veiltar, a male who looked older than Zephyra, stepped forward. His skin was darker blue, and the light patterns on his head moved more slowly. I am Corvain. I have heard about the human called Jake Morrison, who shares his chaotic thoughts. I wish to experience this chaos for myself. The 3rd alien was female, like Zephyra, but smaller. Her light patterns flickered rapidly like she was nervous or excited. I am Lyra. I have studied your human art and music through the data transmissions. Your creations are so full of feeling. We make nothing like them. Our art is perfect and beautiful and dead. Jake looked at the 3 aliens standing in his doorway and realized that everything was about to change. These weren't just scientific subjects or diplomatic contacts. They were individuals with their own hopes and fears and desires. They had risked everything to come here, to learn what it meant to be truly alive. Come in, he said, stepping back. All of you. We have a lot to talk about. As they entered his small quarters, Jake noticed that other crew members were gathering in the hallway. Word was spreading fast through the ship. The aliens were here. The real cultural exchange was about to begin. But Jake also noticed something else. His tablet was flashing with an urgent message from the bridge. The Veiltar High Council had detected the missing young ones. They were demanding immediate return of their citizens. And they were sending ships to make sure it happened. The revolution that Captain Rodriguez had worried about wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was here, aboard their ship, standing in Jake's quarters and asking to learn about human emotions. The question now was whether they could protect these brave young aliens from their own people, and whether humanity was ready for the consequences of teaching another species how to feel. The alarm klaxons woke Jake from a deep sleep. Red emergency lights flashed in his quarters as Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the ship's communication system. All hands to stations. We have multiple Veiltar vessels approaching. This is not a drill. Jake rushed to get dressed and ran to the bridge. The main screen showed a sight that made his stomach drop. 12 massive Veiltar ships surrounded the Discovery in a perfect sphere formation. Each ship was twice the size of their vessel and glowed with the same purple and silver light as the alien city. "How long have they been there?" Jake asked as he took his position at the science station. "They appeared 15 minutes ago," Amy replied from her communications post. Her face was pale with worry. "No warning, no gradual approach. They just materialized out of nowhere." Captain Rodriguez stood in the center of the bridge, her jaw set in determination. "Have they made any demands?" "Yes, Captain," Amy said. "They want the 3 young Veiltar returned immediately. They say we have corrupted their citizens and that allowing them to remain will cause irreparable damage to their society." Jake thought about Zephyra, Corvain, and Lyra. The 3 aliens had spent the past 2 days living among the human crew. The changes in them had been remarkable. Zephyra laughed now, something Jake had never heard her do before. Corvain had started, asking philosophical questions about the meaning of existence. Lyra had spent hours in the ship's art gallery, staring at human paintings and sculptures with wonder in her silver eyes. "Where are they now?" Jake asked. "In the recreation area with Dr. Sullivan and some of the crew," Ben replied. "They were learning to play chess when the alarm sounded." The main screen flickered, and a new face appeared. This Veiltar was clearly much older than the young ones aboard the Discovery. His skin was almost white instead of blue, and the light patterns on his head moved very slowly in complex geometric shapes. When he spoke, his voice was cold and mechanical. "I am High Counselor Velnash of the Pure Circle. You will return our citizens immediately or face the consequences of your interference." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "This is Captain Lisa Rodriguez. The individuals you speak of came aboard our ship voluntarily. They're free to leave whenever they choose." "They are not free," Velnash replied. "They have been contaminated by your chaotic thought patterns. They can no longer make rational decisions. They must be cleansed and healed before the damage spreads to others." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "Contaminated? They're not sick. They're becoming more alive." Velnash's mirror eyes focused on Jake through the screen. "You are the primary source of the contamination, Jake Morrison. Your undisciplined mind has infected our young ones with dangerous emotions, fear, anger, desire, hope. These are weaknesses that we eliminated from our species long ago. And look what it did to you," Jake shot back. "You turned yourselves into living machines. You have no art, no dreams, no growth. You're not perfect. You're dead inside." "Jake," Captain Rodriguez warned quietly. But Jake was too angry to stop. "Zephyra told me about your society, how your children are born already knowing everything they'll ever know, how your scientists never discover anything new because they never wonder about anything, how your artists create the same beautiful, meaningless patterns over and over. You didn't achieve perfection. You achieved extinction." Velnash's face showed no emotion, but the light patterns on his head began moving faster. "Your species is young and foolish. You mistake chaos for creativity, weakness for strength. We will not allow you to spread this infection." The transmission ended, and the screen went black. Immediately, Amy's console lit up with warning signals. "Captain, they're charging their weapons. Energy readings are off the charts." "Red alert," Captain Rodriguez commanded. "All hands to battle stations. Shields up." Jake ran to the recreation area to find the 3 young Veiltar. They were huddled together in a corner, their skin flickering between blue and pale white. Dr. Sullivan was with them, talking quietly. "Are you all right?" Jake asked. Zephyra looked up at him with fear in her silver eyes. It was the first time Jake had seen her afraid, and it broke his heart. "They will take us back," she said. "They will put us in the cleansing chambers until we forget everything we have learned here, until we forget what it feels like to truly live." "We won't let that happen," Jake promised. Corvain shook his head sadly. "You cannot fight the Pure Circle, Jake Morrison. They have powers you do not understand. They can reach into minds across vast distances. They can make thoughts disappear." "Then we'll find a way to stop them," Jake said. Lyra spoke up, her voice trembling. "There might be a way, but it is very dangerous. For all of us." "What do you mean?" Dr. Sullivan asked. "The Pure Circle's power comes from their unity," Lyra explained. "They think as one mind, feel as one heart. But their unity is also their weakness. If something disrupts their perfect harmony, they become confused and vulnerable." Jake began to understand. "You want to broadcast human thoughts to them, to flood their minds with our chaos." "Yes," Zephyra said. "But not just your thoughts, Jake Morrison. The thoughts of many humans all at once. The Pure Circle has never experienced true chaos. It might be enough to stop them." Dr. Sullivan looked worried. "That could be incredibly dangerous for you three. If you're the conduits for that much mental energy, it could damage your minds permanently." "Our minds are already changed," Corvain said simply. "We can never go back to being what we were. We would rather die as ourselves than live as empty shells." The ship shook as the Veiltar weapons struck their shields. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. "All crew to emergency stations. Shields are holding, but not for long." Jake made a decision. "How do we do it? How do we broadcast human thoughts?" Zephyra stood up, her skin glowing brighter with determination. "You must gather as many of your crew as possible. Form a circle around us. Think your loudest, most chaotic thoughts. We will amplify them and send them to the Pure Circle ships." "What kind of thoughts?" Jake asked. "Everything," Lyra said. "Love and hate, hope and fear, dreams and nightmares, memories of joy and sadness, arguments with yourselves, contradictory desires, all the beautiful mess of human consciousness." Dr. Sullivan shook her head. "I can't recommend this. We don't know what it will do to any of you." "We know what will happen if we don't try," Zephyra said. "The Pure Circle will take us away. They will erase what we have become, and they will make sure no other Veiltar ever learns what we have learned." The ship shook again, harder this time. Jake could hear the strain in the engines as they tried to maintain power to the shields. They were running out of time. "I'll ask for volunteers," Jake said. "Anyone who wants to help can join the circle. Anyone who doesn't feel safe can stay. Away!" Within minutes, word had spread through the ship. Crew members began gathering in the recreation area. Amy came first, followed by Ben and several other scientists. Engineers left their posts. Security officers abandoned their weapons. Even Captain Rodriguez came, leaving the bridge in the hands of her second officer. Soon there were 40 humans, standing in a large circle around the 3 young Veiltar. Jake looked around at the faces of his crewmates. He saw fear there, but also determination. They were willing to risk everything to protect 3 aliens they barely knew, to defend the right of any being to choose their own path. "Everyone ready?" Jake asked. The crew nodded. The 3 Veiltar joined hands in the center of the circle, their skin glowing brighter than Jake had ever seen. "Now," Zephyra said, Show them what it means to be human. Jake closed his eyes and let his mind fill with everything he had ever felt. Love for his grandmother, anger at his ex-wife, fear of failure, hope for the future, guilt over past mistakes, joy at small victories, the bitter taste of coffee, the warmth of sunlight, the loneliness of space, the excitement of discovery around him. He could feel the other crew members doing the same. 40 human minds opened like flowers, pouring out decades of experience, emotion, and memory. The 3 Veiltar in the center began to glow like small stars as they absorbed and amplified the chaotic symphony of human consciousness. Then, with a sound like thunder in his head, Jake felt their combined thoughts explode outward toward the enemy ships. The wave of human consciousness hit the Veiltar fleet like a storm hitting a calm lake. Jake felt the moment when 40 years of his messy, contradictory thoughts crashed into the perfect minds of the pure circle. Through his connection with Zephyra, he could sense their shock and confusion as they experienced chaos for the first time in thousands of years. The effect was immediate and dramatic. On the bridge monitors, the crew watched as the enemy ships began to drift out of formation. Their perfect sphere became ragged as individual captains started making different decisions. Some ships pulled back, others moved forward. A few began spinning slowly as if their pilots had lost control, but the cost was terrible. In the recreation room, the 3 young Veiltar were glowing so brightly that Jake had to squint to look at them. Zephyra's face showed pain as she struggled to channel the flood of human emotions. Corvain was shaking violently. Lyra had fallen to her knees, but kept her hands locked with the others. "It's too much," Dr. Sullivan shouted over the growing mental noise that filled everyone's heads. They can't handle this level of psychic energy. Jake felt like his brain was on fire. The connection between all the humans and the 3 aliens was creating feedback loops of emotion and memory. He saw flashes of other people's lives. Amy's fear when her father died. Ben's joy at his daughter's birth. Captain Rodriguez's guilt over a mission that went wrong years ago. All of it mixed together in a chaotic soup of human experience. But something else was happening, too. Through the connection, Jake could sense what was occurring on the Veiltar ships. The perfect unity of the pure circle was breaking apart. For the first time in millennia, individual Veiltar were having their own thoughts and feelings instead of sharing one collective consciousness. High Counselor Velnash appeared on the main screen again, but he looked very different now. His pale skin was flickering between white and blue. The geometric patterns on his head were moving erratically. Most shocking of all, his mirror eyes showed something that looked almost like confusion. "Stop this," he demanded. But his voice was no longer cold and mechanical. There was emotion in it now. Fear, anger, something that might have been desperation. "You are destroying us. Our minds cannot process this chaos." Captain Rodriguez had returned to the bridge to coordinate the defense, but she was also part of the mental link. Jake could feel her determination mixed with worry for her crew. "We'll stop when you withdraw your ships and leave our space," she replied. "We cannot withdraw," Velnash said, and for the first time he sounded like a real person instead of a computer. "Our navigation systems are failing. Our crews are experiencing individual thoughts. They no longer respond to unified commands. Some are crying, others are laughing. One ship's crew has begun arguing about the color of stars. We do not understand what is happening to us." Jake realized what they had done. They hadn't just confused the pure circle. They had accidentally given them back their emotions. Thousands of years of suppressed feelings were flooding back all at once. It was like teaching someone to walk by pushing them off a cliff. In the recreation room, Zephyra suddenly spoke. Her voice was weak but urgent. "Jake Morrison, you must choose. We can maintain this connection and force them to retreat, but it will destroy their minds completely. Or we can stop now and try to teach them slowly, carefully, how to feel again." The ship shook as more weapons fire hit their shields. Some of the Veiltar ships were still attacking, but others had stopped fighting entirely. Jake could see crew members on those ships pressed against windows, staring out at space like they were seeing it for the first time. "What do you want to do?" Jake asked Zephyra. She looked at him with eyes that now showed the full range of human emotion. Pain, hope, fear, love, all mixed together. "I want to save my people, all of my people, not just the young ones who were brave enough to seek change, even the old ones who are afraid of feeling." Jake made his decision. "Everyone, start pulling back. Slowly. Don't cut the connection all at once or it might damage them." The 40. Humans began to carefully reduce the intensity of their mental broadcast. It was like turning down the volume on a symphony that had been playing at maximum loudness. The 3 Veiltar in the center stopped glowing quite so brightly, though they still trembled with the effort of maintaining the link. On the screen, Velnash was blinking rapidly as if trying to clear his vision. "The chaos is lessening," he said. "But it has not stopped. I can still feel things I do not understand. Sadness for ships that were lost long ago, anger at decisions made by previous councils, joy at the beauty of distant stars. How do you live with so many feelings at once?" "Very carefully," Captain Rodriguez replied. "And with a lot of help from friends." Dr. Sullivan stepped forward. "High Counselor, what you're experiencing is normal for beings with emotions. The key is learning to process these feelings instead of being overwhelmed by them. We can teach you, if you want to learn." Velnash was quiet for a long moment. Jake could sense through the connection that he was struggling with concepts that were completely new to him. Finally, he spoke again. "Our society believed that emotions were a weakness, that perfect logic and unified thought were the highest achievements of any species. But I am feeling something now that I cannot ignore. When I thought some of our ships might be destroyed in this battle, I felt afraid. Not for myself, but for the individuals aboard those ships. People I have known for centuries. Is this what you call caring?" "Yes," Jake said gently. "That's exactly what caring feels like." "It is painful," Velnash observed, "but also somehow precious. I do not want to lose this feeling, even though it hurts." Amy wiped tears from her eyes. "That's the thing about emotions. Even the painful ones are part of what makes life worth living." Over the next several hours, a strange thing happened. Instead of a battle between 2 fleets, it became a therapy session conducted across space. The humans slowly and carefully taught the Veiltar how to experience emotions without being overwhelmed by them. They explained how feelings could coexist with logic, how individuals could make their own choices while still working together, as a group. Some of the Veiltar embraced the change immediately. Jake watched through the viewports as crew members on several ships began what could only be described as celebrations. They were dancing, something their species had not done in thousands of years. Others struggled more with the transition. A few ships had to be guided back to the planet by their companions because their crews were too overwhelmed to function. But none of them wanted to return to their previous emotionless state. Velnash proved to be surprisingly adaptable. As the hours passed, he began asking questions about human society. How did they make decisions when everyone had different opinions? How did they handle disagreements? How did they deal with the pain of loss while still finding reasons to hope? Your species is very young, he said at one point. But perhaps that is why you understand something we forgot, that growth requires change, and change requires the courage to feel uncertain about the future. By the end of the day, an agreement had been reached. The young Veiltar would remain aboard the Discovery as ambassadors and teachers. They would help develop a careful program to reintroduce emotions to their species. Some Veiltar would choose to remain as they were, valuing logic and unity above all else. Others would explore this new way of thinking and feeling. Most importantly, they would work together to find a balance between the Veiltar gift for harmony and the human talent for creative chaos. Jake stood on the observation deck that evening, looking out at the Veiltar fleet that now orbited peacefully alongside the Discovery. Zephyra came to stand beside him. She looked tired but happy, more alive than he had ever seen her. "Thank you, Jake Morrison," she said, "for showing me what it means to be truly conscious, to feel deeply and think chaotically, and still somehow make sense of existence." "Thank you for asking," Jake replied. "I never realized how precious our messy thoughts were until I had to share them with someone who had never experienced anything like them." Zephyra was quiet for a moment, watching her people's ships as they slowly began to change formation from a rigid military pattern to something more organic and flowing. "My people spent so long trying to become perfect that we forgot the most important thing. Perfection is not a destination. It is death. Life exists in the space between order and chaos, where growth and change are always possible." Jake nodded. "And now both our species get to explore that space together." As they watched, one of the Veiltar ships began transmitting music across the fleet. Not the mathematical harmonies they had created for millennia, but something new. Something that mixed their gift for perfect pitch with the emotional complexity they were learning from humans. It was beautiful and strange and full of hope for the future. For the first time since leaving Earth, Jake felt like their mission had truly succeeded. They had not just made contact with another species, they had helped that species rediscover what it meant to be alive. And in doing so, they had learned something important about themselves. That the chaos in human minds, the contradictions and struggles and messy emotions they sometimes wished they could eliminate, were actually humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy.